Teresa Garwood, Eric Ravilious' wife, and herself a talented wood engraver, artist and designer, wrote in her memoriam. Sociable and inclined to modesty about his own achievements, Ravilious was fun to be with and made no enemies in artistic circles, often riven by rivalries and disputes. Both male and female acquaintances clearly delighted in his singular charm, and friends were warmed by his authentic love of life. Gordon in The Observer wrote, "In Ravilious the most marked influences are Seurat, Van Gogh and the Brothers Nash, but these have been properly dominated and emulsified into the quite different whole Eric Ravilious. Between the arts of seeing and perceiving a gulf lies. Of talented artists, the majority do but see, clearly perhaps, hypnotically sometimes, but most moments of extra perceptions are rare. Of these watercolours by Ravilious, one may feel that a large number of them do touch true perception." Eric Newton in the Sunday Times made the same point under the heading Personality in Watercolour. "He paints trees as though he were a squirrel, flower pots as though he were a gardener, mountains as though he were a sheep, cliffs and lighthouses as though he were a seagull, a set of chalk figures such as the Aylesbury White Horse, lighthouses, rowing boats, beds, beaches, greenhouses. The subjects of the first kind appear in the first Swimmer exhibition and in the following one in 1936. The incongruity of these abandoned machines had the serialist quality of the found object, while the presentation of geometric solids amidst natural growth has an abstract appeal. A psychological reading might present them as memento mori or as masculine archetypes subdued by feminine nature." A physical inclination. At Castle Hedingham he became friendly with the new vicar, Guy Heffer, and helped him burn the previous vicar's temperance hymn books when he first took up his post. He enjoyed the kind of folk symbolism represented by harvest festivals and Christmas in his village, and even the evangelical hymns sung at home by the Saunders family of Caberley-Finn. A challenged public understanding, was welcomed by critics with a warmth and understanding which gave him confidence. He began that summer to work on a series of chalk hill figures, completed in the first months of the war in 1939. The Willington Giant had already appeared in the Lansdowne Monotype Almanac of 1929 and in the background of the Morley College murals. The white outline, man, is a form of massive engraving on a hillside, whose style of drawing cannot have resembled Ravilious' own by accident. Ravilious did not return to this subject for another 8 years, when he was joined by the Uffington White Horse, two views of the 1778 White Horse at Westbury in Wiltshire, the figure of George III on horseback outside Weymouth, and finally the Cerne Abbas Giant, the last of the series completed by Ravilious in December after it had been camouflaged. Near. He proposed that they should run away somewhere remote, adding, "At any rate, let's not die heroically in the home counties." By 1939, the fantasy of running away was over. James, their second son, was born to Eric and Tirza on the 22nd of August, and Ravilious became more reconciled to family life. For Paul Nash, the epic struggle between contending bomber fleets was an allegory of good and evil, carrying him back to the happenings in the sky of teenage works like The Angel and Devil, determined that what the body is denied, the mind must achieve. He was studying volumes of secondary material, particularly photographs, to distill the personality of planes in flight, to crystallize a version of war where machines were the real protagonists. For Eric, bombers were repellent things, which, like ruined buildings, he had little desire to paint, and the aeroplanes that attracted his eye were reminiscent of much earlier flying machines. Louis Blériot's plane was a sensation when displayed near one of his father's shops the week after the first Channel flight. Even if we cannot be certain that Ravilious saw it as a 6-year-old, the consequential development of Eastbourne as an early aviation centre meant that as a youngster he frequently saw flying machines above Hampden Park. One of his earliest surviving drawings, astonishingly assured in detail, shows a Blackburn monoplane taking off from nearby St. Anthony's Head airfield. Its aesthetic descendants, the tiger moth is the perfect plane for drawing, were the ones he favoured during the last 9 months of his life. Of September 1942, 4 days after landing at Reykjavik. Approaching Iceland, he had been fascinated by cratered mountain country he could see, with shadows very dark and striped like leaves. And now at Cambar, he would have looked down across a volcanic plain to the aircraft situated beyond the milky meltwaters of broad Fulsa River. Shortly at his arrival at the base, 3 Hudson aircrafts were ordered to the air. The plane Ravilious was on never returned, and the only wreckage that was found was a wheel that was washed ashore. The letter arrived to Tirza that Eric wrote on his last night in Reykjavik, full of joie de vivre. I was taken to lunch in the town to eat Icelandic food, and the spread was unbelievable, like Fortnum at its best. Caviar and pate, cheese, goodness knows what. You assemble a pyramid of all this on your plate and drink milk with it. He had seen a narwhal horn, was promised an expedition to the geysers, and suggested that she send an outline of her hand so he could buy gloves. Get well, Tashio. Goodbye, darling. Take care of yourself. Night became one of his favoured effects, providing the flattening and simplification of detail he sought anyway. When it was suggested that he might take part in a television broadcast, he imagines, "One of those wireless compares tell me, Mr. Ravilious, do you prefer working by night?" Lighthouses, effective in providing a vertical contrast with the horizon, made another group of maritime subjects found at Dungeness, New Haven, Rye Harbour, and built 2 at Beachy Head. Michael Rothenstein believed that a 1939 night view of Beachy Head marked an important point in the growth of Ravilius's technique. He is here attempting to develop his design rather in the manner of Chinese landscape, using a few shapes only, drastically simplified. But there is a second element emerging. Perhaps the low-toned surfaces of Beachy Head needed breaking with pointed light. That, at any rate, seems a plausible reason for a first appearance of fresh incentive here. Certainly the preoccupation with a close stippling of colour, which came to characterise later work, is new.